Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of The Metagame, right here on the Dice Towers YouTube channel. This is the live streaming show where we talk not only about board games, but sometimes we talk about talking about board games. But before we start talking, let's pop over to our live chat to make sure that you guys can actually hear the talking. So let's pop over here. As soon as I get a thumbs up from the live chat that the audio is good, we'll continue on. Because today, this show is going to be on a different day, so we might have a kind of a different audience in the mix. But so for anyone watching here as we are streaming, I want to let you know how this show works. I will present a topic. I'm your host, Chaz Marler, and today's topic is going to be all about expansions. I got just a metric ton of questions and ideas and stuff about expansions. But this show isn't going to be just listening to a talking head for a full hour. The purpose of the show is to participate with the live chat that is watching. So what I have in a little browser window, I have the live chat in a browser pop-up window, and I'm going to be asking some questions and communicating with the chat. So if you're in the live chat stream right now and you have a question or you want to participate in today's discussion, go ahead and add a comment. And as always, add the hashtag TMG to your post that you put in live chat. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my web browser's search tool to search for that hashtag. So all of the comments and stuff in the chat that have that are going to be highlighted, which allows me to actually filter out the conversation between people in the chat and find the stuff where people are talking directly to the show. So if you're in the chat and you have that and you have something you want to contribute, add that hashtag TMG and I'll search for it and find it. In addition to today's live streaming chat area, this was another week where I had the opportunity to actually post today's question in the Dice Tower forum over on Board Game Geek. And we got about a dozen or so different replies of people talking about expansions. Some people went into great detail about expansions. So I may be popping into the forum post every now and then to see what people have to say over there. But in the meantime, let's start talking here, you, me, and the live chat about expansions. Now, expansions are such an expansive topic that I wanted to kind of take this in chunks. I'm also wondering if this topic is so grandiose that this might actually be split into several different episodes, perhaps. I don't know, depending on how much participation we have with the chat and how much of the actual questions we get through. But essentially, let's start with just the absolute basics. Just anyone who's wondering, what is an expansion? Typically these days a board game will be published, and sometimes the board game feels complete. Sometimes a board game may actually feel like it just still needs something. And inevitably, lots of times publishers will release additional content. If it was a video game, it'd be DLC or downloadable content. I guess it's analog additional content, AAC for board games. But the expansions will add more stuff to the base game. And as I was going through working on my notes for this episode, and I came up with the first thing is I started to find three kind of trends in the expansions that I went through. And I wanted to bounce this off you guys to see if you guys agree about three general categories of expansions. I thought that would be a good place to start. I found that the three kind of categories that expansions seemed to fit into were, first of all, just expansions that add more content. More of the same, just more stuff to choose from. Stuff that could have been in the base game and really made no difference on the way the base game plays or the rules of the base game. Just more stuff. And I think any expansion for a CCG or an LCG, customizable collectible card game, or a living card game, any of those lifestyle type games, a lot, not necessarily all, but a lot of the expansions for those games fit into that category of just adding more stuff to the game. And The next category was expansions that actually seem to complete the game. Expansions that kind of, for one reason or another, kind of spackle in the gaps that it seemed like perhaps were left when the game was manufactured. A great example, the base game can still be a wonderful game, but then the expansion comes out and either makes you go, oh, yeah, I thought they were going to add something for that, or makes you go, whoa, I didn't even think about that, but now that I see it, the expansion makes this game truly complete. And the number one game on my list that I thought that fits into the expansion of completing the game was definitely Scythe. Here's a game that was released recently, and the game board has little sections on the game board with each of the different player factions' emblem on the board for where their home base is, where they start. And the base game's board comes with 2 little emblems that aren't included in the game. And the expansion came out, and sure enough, the expansion has units, factions, armies for those 2 different little emblems on the board. So this is kind of an extreme case where as Scythe was developed, the base game was developed knowing full well that 2 more factions were going to be released in expansion because they actually made a place specifically for those factions right there on the board when the base game was produced. So completing the game. So adding more content, actually rounding out, completing the game. And the third category of what I think expansions do would be to revitalize or add a twist to the game. Actually change the gameplay, add an extra layer to it. Like I said, maybe to be an older title that wants to be revitalized, so the expansion will come out and breathe new life into it. Or even put a twist on it. Add things that you're like, whoa, now we're playing the game a little bit differently than we did before. And this could be for better or for worse. A couple of examples of revitalization expansions that come to mind. One would be kind of Suburbia was one, where Suburbia had the long tiles that you could add. The long brown tiles was a completely new tile type and added some things like that. And also the 5-star expansion added a new type of way to do scoring and earn points in Suburbia. But I think a larger one would be a recent expansion for Pandemic: The Cure. The Experimental Meds expansion. This expansion adds more player characters, but it adds an entirely new... In Pandemic: The Cure, there are 4 different diseases that the players are trying to fight around the world. And Pandemic: The Cure adds a 5th one that behaves completely differently than the others. And it also, in addition to the new player characters and this 5th disease, it even adds another set of green and yellow dice that do all these hot zones or something. Do just also make the game just another layer of complexity. And I think that definitely fits that mold of revitalizing Pandemic: The Cure. So that's kind of the first phase of this. I'm going to turn over to the chat to see what people want, kind of the introductions of people, what was first on people's mind, and then the follow-up people have to this. But so that's the first section. Do you agree or disagree with these 3 expansion categories? Expansions that just add more content, complete the game, and revitalize the game. And do you have any expansions that don't fit that mold that you can think of? And is there a 4th, maybe 5th or something, other category that expansions could fit into that I missed? Let's turn over to the chat, see what people are talking about, and kind of see if we can catch up to the answers to this question. And then we'll come back to the next part of the presentation that we had. So, hello chat. I'm going to do my search here correctly this time. TMG. And it looks like we have 23 posts that are highlighted here. So, we start today with Gazentia. So we're going to go through and kind of see what people have been talking about and see where the conversation goes from here. Gazentia joins us and mentions that with a question. Has a question about our ongoing microwave acquisition saga. Gazentia asks, have you had any expansions for your microwave acquisition quest game? And for those of you who are wondering what this is about, for, I don't know, the last 5-6 episodes, I have had this ongoing side quest, I guess you could call it. My microwave broke. And I got a replacement microwave and it didn't work right and it didn't fit the space that I had. So essentially I have to get another new microwave that will hopefully be a correct one that actually works the way it's supposed to work. But the chat has become fascinated with this side quest that I'm on. So if unfortunately Gazentia and everyone else that was wondering, I can satiate all of your questions, just letting you know that in the past week, I'm sorry to say, no progress has been made on the microwave side quest. So no need to bring it up any further during today's episode, guys, because nothing's new on that front. So let's continue on. I hope that answers your question, Gazentia. Let's move on to the next one with Kabuki Kid, who thankfully has a post that's on topic. Kabuki joins us to say, the best expansions are the ones that you never want to play without after using them. And I am in that same boat. I agree. I love an expansion that when you play it, you're like, whoa, that's fantastic. This game, I guess that would fit into the complete the game scenario where it's like, I just can't imagine playing this game without this expansion anymore. So I agree with you there. Lords of Waterdeep's expansion, continues Kabuki. Lords of Waterdeep's expansion is a really good example. It's a great one. Love the corruption mechanism. And this might be now that the Lords of Waterdeep expansion, which is, I agree, excellent expansion. Oddly enough, wasn't on my list of top expansions, but should be. Because that reminds me that another purpose of this particular episode that I'm hoping to get into is for anyone watching or listening or whatever, I'm hoping that between the chat and I, we can develop a list of a lot of expansions that we think are quality expansions. So anyone watching or listening might be able to just hear of some expansions for games that maybe they didn't realize there was an expansion that had come out for that game, or might help introduce them to expanding a base game that they already have, or even getting into the game in the first place. So as we get to the show later in the second half of the show, hopefully we'll get into kind of listing a lot of our top expansions and why, and hopefully that will help provide a nice juicy list to spur the imagination and help anyone listening to maybe stumble onto some new games and new expansions. So that's kind of the second half. But the Lords of Waterdeep one, with its corruption track, I agree, absolutely just changes Lords of Waterdeep for the better. And it's one of those expansions that once you play it, I agree, you'll never want to go back to not playing with it. Okay, Gazentia also mentions, there are a couple of types of expansions that I like. Ones that bend the core game into a new shape that adds variety. The expansions that give more of the same, and those that do a little bit of both. Excellent. I think that fits right in with those three categories that I introduced earlier. So it's kind of nice to see that perhaps there might be some substance to those categories of expansions. So let's continue on to see if if there's any more consensus on that. Kabuki then also mentions there are also expansions that will radically change the game. The examples here that Kabuki Kid gives are like Orleans, or I'm gonna Americanize it and ruin it and say Orleans, the Orleans Invasion expansion, where it turns the game into a cooperative game. It's very different, but very cool. I've played the base game of Orleans, but I have not played with the expansion, so I can't speak to that specifically. But from what I have seen from other podcasters and YouTubers and such about that expansion is that, yes, anyone who enjoys Orleans, definitely it's worth taking a look, trying or adding the Orleans Invasion expansion to your library. I've heard it's a really, really good expansion. It does change the play style of the game substantially, which is amazing that they were able to do that, change the way the core game plays. That's amazing that they were able to make that work. But anyone that enjoys Orleans Invasion, definite expansion to check out more information on. All right. Pith's Attic joins us with a question. Pith's Attic asks, hello, Chaz. Should expansions fit into the original game box? Oh, excellent. Okay, here we have a philosophical expansion question. This is excellent. Personally speaking, I prefer it when expansions fit in the original game box. If at all possible, oh yes, I think it's great when expansion fits in the core game, original game box. It's extremely rare when, to me, that's permissible. If I'm going to comment on this, let's just go all the way. I'm looking at my game shelf across the room from me, and before the show, I was going through kind of counting the games and which ones have expansions. And of all the games on my game shelf right now, I think there are only 2, maybe 3 games in which I have allowed the game to sit on my shelf with the expansion box next to it, taking up more shelf real estate. Every other game, the expansion gets crammed into the base box, like it or not. But Eldritch Horror and Descent and Exodus Proxima Century, those are the 3 games in which they are allowed to have the expansion taking up extra shelf space in their own original expansion box. Everything else crammed together. Fortunately, most games have such unnecessary game inserts that the base game's unnecessary insert can be tossed away to the 4 winds, and the expansion can be used to fill that space. Perhaps that's why game boxes are made so large these days and the inserts are so ridiculous, is so they're easily removable to add those expansions in. And if that is the case, bravo to the publishers and designers for their foresight in designing that. But what about you guys? Do you guys keep your expansions in base? Do you guys keep your expansions in the expansion box that they came in? I think I only know like maybe 1% of the board game population I've ever met actually keeps the expansions. Everyone else smooshes them together. But let me know if you guys have different approaches than that. How do you handle that and the real estate that those expansions take up in your collection? But as people are chewing on that, let's continue on to Espenfer, who mentions some games have got too many expansions and add-ons. Take Conan. I think it had 22 expansions / add-ons. That's insane. Wow, 22 expansions. That is a lot. That's like Descent a little bit, it seems. Sometimes if a game... Actually, let's talk about that real quick. If a game has too many expansions, does that cause consumer paralysis to where if there becomes too many expansions to keep up on, you just throw up your hands and say, forget it. I'm not going to collect these expansions in the first place. There have been a couple of games like that where I have been interested and maybe even got the base game or was considering getting the base game. But when I looked at how many expansions for this game have been released, it was actually a turnoff. It's like, you know what? I don't want to invest all of my time and resources into getting all of this stuff for this game. So I'm just going to choose not to invest in that game and move on to a different one. Can there be expansion overload that actually ruins getting into a game for people? But like Conan's 22 expansions. 22 expansions. That is a lot of expansions. I agree. That is an insane number. Jennifer Crow joins us to mention my favorite expansion is for Shipwrights of the North Sea. Oh, haven't played that one. Cool. Turns a game I really didn't like into a game I actually enjoy. That is a fantastic power of an expansion. Wow. If an expansion can take a game that you didn't really like in the first place and turn it into one that you actually enjoy, that is very, very cool. That actually would be, wow, that's almost worthy of an episode in and of itself. Expansions that did that, turned a game around that you didn't like and turned it into one that you did like. Anybody else out there? Great discussion topic. Anyone else out there in that same boat? No pun intended with Shipwrights of the North Sea. But anyone else in that same boat where they had a game they didn't care for and then the expansion came along and boy howdy, now the game is enjoyable? That would be a really, really neat one to find out more. Scanning my own shelves to see if there's one that fits that criteria. and nothing's jumping out at me. So let's continue on to the next comment in the chat. All right. Gazentia mentions again here, kind of a two-parter here. Gazentia mentions, I'd class the Scythe expansions. I think we've caught up to the category portion of this. I'd class the Scythe expansions in the second category, which I believe was completing the game. The first Orleans expansion into the first category, which is just more content, and Tuscany as an expansion that does both. Oh yeah, that was one of the things I was going to mention, that every expansion doesn't necessarily have to fit into just one of these categories. Many will straddle multiple categories. So Tuscany is an expansion that does both. At least Tuscany to Viticulture Second Edition. I'm not sure if Tuscany Essentials does any more of the same to the does any more of the same compared to the Viticulture Essentials. That sentence had a lot of words in there that my mouth did not want to say. I apologize. But yes, the Tuscany expansions, Viticulture and everything, those I believe are very heavy duty expansions that are also very highly praised for the quality and the enhancements that they make to the game. So those are definitely expansions that if you enjoy the base game are definitely worth investing in to see, because you may also greatly enjoy those expansions as well. But let's continue on. I apologize. Let's continue on to a comment that I might actually be able to pronounce. So we'll try this one. Tony Soprano joins us. Hello, Tony, to ask the following question. He asks, do you automatically buy the expansions to a game or play the base game first? And that's a really good question. That's actually a good question for everyone too. This would be a really nice one to get actually a poll for, if possible. But I didn't realize this question was coming up, so I wasn't able to plan that far ahead. I'm thinking of the other people in my game group as well. I think it depends. It depends oftentimes. I'd give it a 50-50, perhaps. It depends sometimes if I am already familiar with the base game. If I am familiar with the base game to the point where I know what to expect and I kind of know how to play it a little bit, either from watching reviews or watching playthroughs, not necessarily playing the game, but sometimes just the reviews and the playthroughs are enough to kind of show me how it works. If I have that type of advanced knowledge about the base game and the expansions, sometimes I'll actually get the expansion right along with the base game. Good example of that one is Lords of Vegas. Lords of Vegas was a game that I really, when I discovered it, was like, wow, this is great. And I really enjoyed the game. And I heard about the Up expansion for Lords of Vegas, which allows you to build your casinos vertically in addition to just spreading out through the Las Vegas Strip. And I love the idea, and I love Lords of Vegas, so I scooped up I purchased the Up expansion at the same time as I purchased my copy of Lords of Vegas. The one caveat to that, Tony, that I will tell you, is one thing I've learned. When in that situation, being familiar with the game, but not necessarily being a master of how to play it, even if I buy the expansions along with the base game at the same time, I have learned, at least for myself, I never mix in the expansion into the base game until I have played the base game at least a couple of times to the point where I could explain how to play to others and have it down. There was Among the Stars was the game that I learned not to do that with, or learned to do that with and not mix everything in. Among the Stars, I found out about, watched reviews, decided, I really liked the look of the game. It's similar in some respects to Seven Wonders, but I've played Seven Wonders, and Seven Wonders is just okay to me. But Among the Stars seemed to, just some of the differences, take that whole set of mechanisms up a level. So I decided to invest in Among the Stars. And so since I was familiar with the mechanisms with Seven Wonders, so I had the idea of how to play Among the Stars, and had watched all these reviews about Among the Stars and all of its expansions, I got them all at the same time, was super excited, opened up all the boxes, mixed everything together into the one box, sealed it up, took it to my game day, was super excited to play, opened it up, and tried to explain and learn how to play the base game with all of its expansions at the same time. And that was an error. Didn't work. It was just a mess. In fact, I don't even know. I think we did play. We ended up ripping all of the expansion stuff out, setting aside and just playing the base game to get used to that. And I came home and took all the expansion stuff out of the base box, put it aside until we mastered how to play Among the Stars a little better, and then gradually added the expansions in. So, automatically buying the expansions along with the base game, like I said, yeah, I think that's kind of a 50-50 thing, me personally. But my advice to anyone is, even if you do that, make sure you master the base game in and of itself before you add those expansions in. Don't let the temptation to add them in out of excitement get to you, because lots of times it can actually hinder your learning of the game or your gameplay experience at first. So there's kind of the what and why in the answer to that question, Tony. Thank you for the awesome question, though. Let's continue on with another question from Gazensha, who this time is going to mention, what are your thoughts on games like Onirim or Pandemic Iberia that include quote-unquote expansion modules with the base game? I think that is fantastic, purposefully, personally. I think that's really cool when a game actually throws in kind of some mini expansions in the base game just as part of it. Another one that is like that that reminds me of is Agamemnon, a recent game this last year by Osprey Games. And Agamemnon has a two-sided board, and it's almost like one side is the base game, and then which basically it's a kind of an area control game where you're trying to connect different sections of the game. You're placing little workers in these spots that are connected by strings, and kind of an area control to control the most strings on this board with the little workers that you have placed. And on one side of the board, it's got the basic setup where all of the little strings that connect these are the same type. There's 4 different types of strings, and each one you have to do something different to control that string. So you have to kind of be placing your resources correctly to make the resources match that particular string to control it best. Well, on one side of the board, they're all static. The strings are printed right there on the board, so you always know what you're in for. But you flip the other side of the board, and all of the different spots, it's still kind of the same general layout, places to place your workers with strings connecting them. But the strings now are no longer preset. They're going to be randomized to a certain extent. And it seemed to me that could, and there's some other little things associated with that as well, but that's the general idea. And it seemed to me that was almost like a mini expansion. It almost seemed to me like the one side of the board was the base introductory game, and the other side of the board was the advanced version of the game, almost like you would get an expansion to revitalize it. And they didn't have to include all of that in it, but the fact that they added that, I thought was something that really had that built-in, like I said, built-in revitalization right in the game after you learn how to play the base game. So games like Onirim and Pandemic Iberia and Agamemnon and those other games that add those modules right in the box, some people may think it makes it's too confusing, too much, but I would think the general majority of people would be excited to have those extra options available to them in the game. I think it just is a really nice extra polish that can be put into games. All right. Hope that actually answered your question there. Let's continue on to, let me see here. We have, okay. Wow. We have a lot of questions here and comments, which is actually much more than I expected for a Sunday afternoon. Oh, that reminds me. I'm sorry. I was going to start the show off with this, but I was actually, I got distracted by all the chat that had started. It is Sunday, January 15th, by the way. We're midway through the month of January. And as of, I believe, last night, late last night in the evening, the Dice Towers fundraiser reached the stretch goal to finance having me be a contributor to the Dice Towers YouTube channel again for 2017. So I'm sorry, I was going to start the show off with this, but since it came to my mind, I wanted to mention it because it's all because of you guys that are posting messages to me right now that made this possible. So thank you to everyone who has contributed to the Dice Towers fundraiser, and especially who have helped it reach the stretch goal to allow me to be fortunate enough to continue working with the Dice Tower guys again this year, producing more content and videos for their channel. It's a really fortunate position to be in, and I am extremely grateful to everyone who has felt that it is worth their time and resources to allow me to work with the Dice Tower in this way. It's a real blessing. So thank you all very, very much. I'm very, very grateful for that very much. So let's continue on. I'm sorry. Okay, let's see if we can hammer through a few comments here before we continue on here. Kabuki mentions the best expansions are the ones that you will never want to play without after using them. And I know that Kabuki mentioned that because that was the first comment she mentioned. Rats. So I apologize. The comments here jumped. Let me go back up here. Oh no. Oniram. Here we are. It was a different Kabuki Kid comment. It was the one I was looking for. Kabuki Kid mentions, any idea what game was the first to have expansions? First one I can think of is Cosmic Encounter, but I'm sure that there may have been some Avalon Hill games that had something at an even earlier date. Wow, that's a really interesting question, which unfortunately I do not know the answer to. And it's one of those where I bet even the true answer to that is probably fuzzy. Some thing was probably released that could qualify as an expansion to some people, but not in others. But that would be a really neat trivia question to find out. The first game to have an official expansion. But I'm sorry, Kabuki, I can't help you there. I don't know. I would like to know, though. Very much like to know. But let's continue on to Jacob's question. Jacob mentions, to me, a good expansion for a game is one that just adds more content to the current game without changes to the game mechanics. Okay, if you have to change the core game, then you should just go make a new game. That is a very interesting point of view, which apparently makes my nose itch. So that's the sign of a good quality statement there. I can see what you're saying there. If it's going to twist this game and make it a new one, just go off and make a new game. Question, though, to Jacob and the others. Let's talk about this previous expansion that's already been mentioned, Orleans Invasion, which does drastically change the game. Should Orleans Invasion, Jacob and everyone else out there, should Orleans Invasion have been produced as a separate game instead of an expansion? Personally, I don't know. I could see it both ways. But I would be interested to see if what your idea is on that and why, because it might actually lead to some different ideas in the developments of expansions in the future, and whether whether things should be published as different games or expansions twisting this normal game. Apparently, I have exhausted all of the words that I had available to respond to your statement with Jacob, but I hope that was an adequate response. Let me refill my response jar here and continue on to Alexander, who's going to say, what do you think about expansions, which are obviously part of the base game and were excluded to make more money? Okay, so in my experience may not match everyone else's. I have been fortunate with my game purchases in that the amount of times that I have felt like a game was released only partially done, and then sure enough an expansion comes out that fills in those gaps that were missing on purpose. The amount of times I've experienced that has been few and far between. Looking at my game shelf, seeing if one pops out. Of course, no, any game that did that will probably make me upset to the point where I got rid of it. Yeah. But, so, if a game does that though, yeah, that is extremely frustrating. And I wonder sometimes if it's, production issues. But to give them the benefit of the doubt, Alexander, there could be multiple reasons. Sure, you could have the cash grab. We're just get this out there. But then there could be production problems. There could be timelines and deadlines. Again, from the other side of the coin, the benefit of the doubt, I don't think any publisher, or at least the majority of quality publishers, would want to publish a partial game if they can help it, because that's just going to come back and bite you, especially in a saturated marketplace where there's so many games coming out. If your game is only partially done, your game's sunk, and no one's going to buy the expansion anyway, I would think. So that's why I think, at least in my experience, it's been really rare. If you know of specific games in which you feel that way, post them up in the comments, either in the post chat here or the comments after this YouTube video goes live. It would be interesting to know which games out there are seen as being partial, because perhaps one person's partial game that was pumped out just to make more money from its expansions, maybe one person's game is another person doesn't see it that way. So very interested to see if there's a consensus on which games did that, because off the top of my mind, none are coming to my mind at the moment, so I apologize. But good question, though. Good discussion topic there. Let's continue on, though, because this hour is just flying by a lot faster than I expected. So let's continue on with Toyota, who mentions, I have the completionist disease. Oh, good. I was hoping the completionism would come up here in discussion at some point. I have the completionist disease. I have to get all expansions for a game. And it sort of becomes a metagame for me where I must have more expansions than my friends. And it becomes a race to get them all. Well, that's extreme. I agree. I think a lot of board gamers struggle, especially board gamers who are really into the hobby and have a collection that they actually, consider themselves. They have enough games where they consider themselves to have a collection or a library. They're that enough into the hobby where they have that level. I think the gamers at that level, we do tend to be completionists, especially when it's a game that we find, that we enjoy. Oh boy, there's more for this thing I like a lot. I'm going to get everything I can for it. That can be a challenge in and of itself right there. Personally speaking, for myself and one of my best friends in my local gaming group, my local gaming club, we've really struggled with completionism. And just within the last, I'd say 18 months, have gotten to the point where we've purposefully said, okay, we're going to cut off some games. We're going to actually not go get these expansions. And I actually had to go out of our way to not. And so I know that it's something where you mentioned Toyota, the completionist disease, kind of tongue in cheek there, hopefully. But I think it is actually something that can be something that board gamers struggle with, and something that sometimes can be unhealthy to have this completionist attitude. Now, like I said, I am one of the people that, I'm still buying expansions for Smash Up. And I looked at my little dots I put on Smash Up. I actually played Smash Up weekend before last, but I played it out of guilt because I realized I hadn't played this game in almost 2 years. Where's that box? Oh, I put it away in a different spot. Oh, yes, it had that color. Yeah, it'd been over a year since I played it, but I was still buying the expansions when they came out. And so Smash Up was one of those games that was, slap in the face, a splash of cold water, that made me realize, why am I getting all these expansions? So if you are someone else who feels like they have this completionist syndrome, habit, and it's getting to the point where it can become a barrier to your enjoyment of the hobby or something, maybe that's something that could be a topic in and of itself. That might be an episode. Completionism. Actually, that is a good idea for an episode of completionism and everything. So if there is any interest in an episode about completionism, let me know in the comments below, and we'll go into that, because it could be a touchy subject. So I don't want to just steamroll into that thinking everyone wants to talk about that one. But thank you, Toyota, for, again, another excellent discussion topic. Okay. Good gravy. There's so many comments here. Rats. I'm torn. But like I mentioned, I did want to talk about some expansions. So here's what I want to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to list my top 5 best expansions, I think. My favorite expansions that I just think if you have this base game, this expansion, absolutely necessary. And then anyone in the live chat, go ahead and post what's your top expansion. What's the number 1 expansion, if you haven't posted it already in the chat? What's the number 1 expansion that you would get for anyone listening if they're like, they don't have it yet and they've never bought an expansion before in their life? So what's your number 1 top expansion? And I'll list my top 5. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue through the chat to try and answer as many questions and statements, and then hopefully get to that point where before we run out of time, we'll actually have listed off some of the nice expansions so people can kind of get an idea of what's out there. I have a gut feeling, though, that actually this discussion on expansions is going to need an expansion of its own and carry over into another episode. But for me, here's my list of my top 5 favorite expansions in no particular order. This is just the order that they came to mind. The first one is the recent Pantheon expansion for Seven Wonders Duel. The Pantheon expansion for Seven Wonders Duel adds this whole new layer. Seven Wonders Duel was already an excellent game, but this expansion just adds this whole layer with these gods that you gain favor with, and some other things. So it adds a whole new ways to earn victory points and potentially win the game, new powers, new wonders and things. It is just a fantastic expansion that really rounds out the game. It's one of those where it's like, the game was already good. I didn't even realize it needed an expansion, but now it's like, oh, this just has a little more depth and a few more layers to it that still all really mesh together really well. Adds a little more complexity to the game, but it's still an excellent expansion. So that's the Seven Wonders Duel Pantheon expansion. The next expansion that I think anyone has the base game is definitely worth looking at is the, the actual name of it? The Edge of Extinction expansion for Exodus Proxima Centauri. There's the granddaddy space opera game out there, 6 to 8 hour playtime is Twilight Imperium 3rd Edition. There's 2 games that a lot of times are seen as Twilight Imperium 3rd Edition Lite. There's Exodus Proxima Centauri and Eclipse, I believe is the other one. Now the thing is, Eclipse is seen more of a Euro game, and Exodus Proxima Centauri is seen more of a Thrashy type game. So it's a little more aggressive than than Eclipse. So that's, to me, that's the one I gravitated towards. And then the Edge of Extinction expansion for it just added more races, more stuff to do, really rounds it out a lot and really makes it a lot meatier game, and is really well done. So that's why the Edge of Extinction expansion for Proxima Centauri is another one of those where if you enjoy the base game, I definitely think that expansion is worth looking into. The next one is on my list with the power-up expansions for King of Tokyo and King of New York. These expansions add little decks of player abilities that can make each monster unique in King of Tokyo and King of New York. And what's really cool about it is you can actually, have them be powers given out to the monsters. You can lay them out like the other upgrades and have them be things that players can obtain. You can just shuffle them all together and deal them out randomly. It just adds so many different things that you can do to continually make the game experience and the monster powers unique. and varied. And again, this is definitely a revitalization expansion. So the power up expansions for King of Tokyo / King of New York, definitely the third one on my list. Let's see, the next two is the expansions for Suburbia. The Suburbia expansions, Suburbia Inc. and the 5-star, there's been 2 expansions. Those add lots of new tiles to the game, more content, and different types of behavioral tiles and some different ways to earn victory points. If you enjoy the city building of Suburbia, this is just one that I've really enjoyed. Again, this is one that really, I think, the focus is more stuff, more options, more things, a few little twists in it, but really, it's one that I've really enjoyed. It's probably not the most go out and get this one exclamation point expansion on my list of necessary expansions, but it's definitely, I love the game Suburbia to begin with, and the expansions for Suburbia. It's another one of those. Suburbia is still one that I would have a completionist behavior for. Everything that comes out for Suburbia, I would probably scoop up with a shovel. Okay. And the last one on my list is an oldie but a goodie, the expansion for Kingsburg. This adds just new technology tree paths that the players can go down. I think it actually has 3 little modules in it. It has some cards and some other special abilities and some things. So, and an event deck or something. But it basically has like 3 little things. The most popular are the additional technology tree options. But it takes Kingsburg and really gives it a lot more variety when you play it a lot. It's one of those, it's not super mega variety to the point where it changes the whole game to a different game, but it definitely gives it a lot more legs. And so the, like I said, the Kingsburg expansion, it's an oldie but a goodie. It's kind of like expansion classic. If you're going to get one, that's why it rounds out my list. So again, that's my list of my top 5 expansions. What's your top expansions? And let's go back to the chat and try to work our way towards the answers to all these questions. All right, and the chat jumped again. I apologize. Let me research here. Okay, we got 101 comments here. Wow, I gotta say I'm really excited that on usually these shows are a different day of the week, so we're on a weekend that we're broadcasting, and we have a lot of viewer interaction here. So that's really, really nice to see. Thank you, guys. Okay, here we are with Toyota. Sorry. Okay, I think Gazensha, here we go. I think this is where we left off. Gazensha mentions, talking about the Scythe expansions. Says, entertainingly, Jamie, who I believe is Jamie Stegmaier of Stonemaier Games, Jamie didn't start working on those factions until after Scythe was actually released. He just wanted to put them onto the base game map to make it less fiddly when those expansions did come out, apparently. And I agree. I think that is the case. I just think it's a testament to Jamie's foresight in game design. If you've ever read his blogs or whatever, he seems to be an extremely competent, awesome designer and businessman. But the fact that he had that foresight to know, I want to add this, they're going to go here. So I don't have the stuff that's going to go there. It doesn't exist yet, but I know where it's going to go and how it's going to fit in. Having that foresight is just amazing. So, Gazicha mentions, I think Star Realms and Race for the Galaxy did similar things. It's possible. I know Star Realms. It's possible because I know. Well, the reason I'm wondering is because I know Star Realms seemed to be a surprise hit. Star Realms came out without a lot of fanfare, and then word of mouth made that game explode. So I don't know. Perhaps the designer of Star Realms, is that White Wizard? They may have had more they wanted to do, but again, were limited because Star Realms wasn't the hit that it is now these days. So they might have been limited in what they could do. So maybe they did have ideas, but they just couldn't flash them out. Don't know. If anyone else knows about Race for the Galaxy and Star Realms, let us know. Mike Jones, no really joins us again to mention, I think the best expansions are the ones that have been planned for and that fit in the main box, a la Pathfinder, the adventure card game. I wonder why this is so rare. that's a very good one. The Pathfinder adventure card game, especially its box, is definitely made to. They had a plan in mind for all of these expansions. There's a slot for every expansion. This is totally out of thin air, Mike Jones, but I think the reason why that is so rare is because producing a larger box like that to accommodate future expansions, every millimeter, literally every millimeter that you increase a box's size during the production costs more money. So it's a gamble. It's a risk. And if your game bombs and you wasted several thousand extra dollars just on getting, a larger box to accommodate a future expansion that now you're never going to make, well, you would have saved money not doing that, when that could have been money you could have put towards investing into a new, different game. So I think can be kind of a catch-22 there. It's definitely a risk or a gamble. Again, that's just from what I've seen, what I've interpreted, and so I've reserved the right to be incorrect there. But I think that's part of it. Toyota mentions expansions I don't like. One's for X-Wing, where they have now unbalanced or have broken the game. And then you have players who spend all their time finding ways to manipulate the new cards to a ridiculous attack, and that's all just overpowered. That is one thing about expansions, especially with a lifestyle game, a CCG or an LCG or a game like X-Wing. Lots of times the expansions will suffer from something called feature creep or power creep, where look at early expansions to Magic the Gathering, like Antiquities, versus the cards that are coming out in expansions these days. The Antiquity cards are ridiculously underpowered compared to the cards that come out now with the combos and the abilities that are available. And it can be really a challenge sometimes for a game designer not to ruin their game by having too much power creep, and that just makes the newer stuff insanely overpowered. So I agree that Toyota, I totally agree with you. That is definitely a challenge, and we have seen expansions ruin some games specifically because of that problem. So it's definitely something to keep in mind when designing expansions. Mike Jones mentions again, do game companies have issues with planning? That is a sobering thought. With my limited experience behind the curtain in the board game industry thus far, I think it was sobering to see just how the planning involved in the board game industry, how much it actually is the same as the amount of planning that goes into every other industry. I don't know why I thought the board game industry, I had them on this pedestal thinking that the board game industry knows its stuff. Lots of times, just like every other industry on the planet, a lot of these companies are flying by the seat of their pants. But it makes it that much more impressive, the quality of the products that are released, and also the amount that this industry works together. Different companies oftentimes will help each other out. Like Crash Games, who has resurrected at least one game that was a failed Kickstarter. And then there was the Doom that came to Atlantic City that was rescued by another publisher. It makes it that much more amazing to see how the people in this industry work together. And that, I think, is what makes this industry stick together and work, is that. So, sobering or not, there's still a silver lining to it. Kabuki Kid mentions, we are 10 minutes away from the end of the show. I apologize. We're going to enter lightning mode, where the lightning round, where I'm going to try and get through as many more of these questions and comments as possible. But so let's do that. With Kabuki Kid first, who mentions, there are also expansions that add a campaign game. Oh, that's true. Like Robinson Crusoe's Voyage of the Beagle. It's definitely a cool new twist to add to a game, which is normally just a single shot scenario. Yes, Descent First Edition, it had its whole campaign system, which was so popular that it actually got rolled in and baked in and became an integral built-in part of Descent Second Edition. Lots of games like that. Arcadia Quest is another one that has I think that was baked in the first, though. But yes, totally agree that is so neat when they can add a campaign system and expansion to a game. Gazensha mentions, I don't see Voyage of the Beagle as necessary. There's so much already in Robinson Crusoe. that is true. It's yeah, it is a really meaty, neat game. But it is cool that they were able to make that work without actually, like Orleans Invasion, not necessarily changing the whole way the game works. They were just able to put it on as an extra layer, which is really cool. Stefan joins us to mention Orleans Invasion is interesting, turning the game into a co-op, completely changing the base concept. It's so cool, like we've mentioned, that they got that to work. In few again though, so it sounds to me like that is one vote towards liking that concept versus having it branch off to a different game. If you have a different opinion on that though, Stefan, let me know in the comments as we go along. Kabuki mentions role-playing games could be an interesting addition here, since pretty much everyone past the base book are almost expansion material. Almost everything after the base book is an expansion. That is a case where you, quote unquote, make your own game in a way. RPGs and actually CCGs and LCGs are something that I kind of left off my own list because, yeah, everything past the base game, it technically could be an expansion. And so when you get into those type of lifestyle games, that is just, expansion after expansion, that, again, could be a whole episode, whole topic in and of itself. Christian mentions, I put 5 categories in the forums, but I agree that you could limit those down to 3. Let me take this moment to remind you, thank you, Christian, for taking the time to flesh that out in the forums. In this video's description below, there is a link to that Board Game Geek forum thread that Christian is mentioning. So I highly recommend continuing the discussion there, because the discussion has already started with like a dozen or so posts. And I believe Christian and a couple other people put some really nice fleshed out posts in that thread, which I'm not going to be able to get time to go through today, but I definitely recommend reading through, and I really appreciate the discussion going on there as well. But yes, so be sure to go check out that discussion thread following the link below. Kenny mentions, if you've played Legends of Andor with the expansions, do you think the expansions help make the game a better experience? Good question. I'm happy to say, Kenny, that actually earlier this very month, I got Legends of Andor, started getting it to the table. I've been playing it with my wife and daughter, but we've only played the base game. Kind of like the theory I mentioned earlier. I haven't even brought out the expansions yet until we go through and get through the base game a little bit. So I can't speak to Legend of Andor's expansions, but I do know that Legend of Andor has 2 expansions at least currently. A small box expansion, which adds like another legend or 2 to work through. But then they have a big box expansion where the box is as big as the base game itself. It adds ships, boats, water, islands, and all this stuff. And I am super excited about it. And I have heard really positive things about the most recent big box expansion for Legend of Andor. So, I can't speak specifically to it, but the buzz I've heard is that the Legend of Andor expansions do help make the game a better experience. So I hope that helps. Christian mentions again, could you add promos and player number expansions as special kinds? He says, but you could add promos and player number expansions as special kinds of expansions, though promos may be any one of those. That is true. Promos, that's a whole nother avocado. That we could get into. That promo stuff, I think, is definitely worthy of a whole episode dedicated to it. Yeah, and again, if that's in the BGG forum thread, let's continue the discussion there and flesh that out, and maybe we'll bring that in as a whole dedicated topic for promos. So thank you, Christian. Jan joins us to mention, I agree with your 3 categories for expansions and would add expansions that upgrade the components of a game. Oh, that is a good category to add, Jan. Yes, component upgrades. Alien Frontiers is one that had an expansion that did specifically that. Took the little cardboard tokens and actually created 3D plastic models of everything in the game, which are a fantastic visual experience upgrade. So yes, I agree. Adding another upgrade expansion category, expansions that upgrade the components. Good one. Thank you. And Mike Jones really is going to, I think, finish us off kind of where we began a little bit. He says about the microwave. Forget the microwave. We're talking important stuff here. Now back to the Arkham expansions. Oh, the Arkham expansions are just filler, eh? Ho, ho, ho. Perhaps we have struck a nerve with Mike Jones, really. Oh boy, expansion. The Arkham, all I know is the Arkham Eldritch Horror. I know Eldritch Horror, set in the Arkham universe, was supposed to be a more distilled down game that wasn't supposed to have the expansion overload that Arkham Horror did. And I think that lasted for about 6 months. And I think it's safe to say that Eldritch Horror is teetering on that edge of having the same expansion overload problem that Arkham Horror just did. You can definitely fill up that box with the expansions for Eldritch Horror. And let's just finish off with a couple more here before we run out of time. Billy mentions us to say, truly, an expansion should add more content / renew the game, i.e. more Dominion cards and more Dixit cards. I was talking with a friend of mine just yesterday who has in his collection nearly everything for Dominion, and Dominion is his favorite game, and he was talking about how that's what he really likes about the Dominion expansions, other than Adventures, which he did not like. But he mentions other than Adventures, all of the Dominion expansions add more content to the game, but added one more new wrinkle. It didn't overdo it, and they had one thing that they did really well. He said that's what he really appreciated about the Dominion expansions. It's just the way that they introduced one new concept to play with and experiment with and fold into the game. And we'll end here with Toyota's comment, which is simply the microwave, strikes back, or the microwave, returns. Well, I'm sorry, but we're not going to be able to answer that question in this episode. We're going to have to wait until next time, at least, because we are truly out of time. Again, I got to say, for posting this on a weekend instead of the normal day of the week, I'm really excited for the amount of contribution that we had in today's show. You guys are amazing. Speaking of amount of contribution, again, going back to the Dice Tower's fundraiser, thank you so much for helping the Dice Tower reach the stretch goal that allows me to continue to participate with them this year. I really super appreciate that too. You guys are what makes all of this possible in every way, and I really appreciate it. Speaking of which, the Dice Tower, that's where you can find more. Bing! Because for more board game news and reviews and commentary and stuff like this and other neat stuff about board games, be sure to check out and subscribe to both the Dice Tower and the Pair of Dice Paradise YouTube channels. And while you're floating around there on the internet, be sure to check out our Facebook and Twitter accounts as well, where we'll continue the conversation. And even the Board Game Geek forum, apparently. So thank you everyone who came by and participated. Again, if I didn't get to your post, I apologize. I do usually go through everything after the show to go through and make notes for next time if there's something I missed. So I will be copying and pasting that chat log. But until the next time that we get a chance to get together, again, thank you all for joining me, because it's not just me here. It is the chat who, without, I could not spend this time playing the metagame. So thanks. And I'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.